So today, and I think a good topic would be the importance of IP, intellectual property, in the digital economy. Because traditionally, IP was about different gadgets, about songs, books, and suddenly we come into the digital era, and so why students should study that? Shouldn't lawyers take care of that? What do you think?
Well, we are educating entrepreneurs, of course, so as we say in the course, we're not expecting them to be lawyers, but in order to work effectively with a lawyer that you might hire into your business, they need to know what kind of questions to ask. And so a basic understanding of intellectual property law and how to protect their business and how to direct a lawyer is really important. And then when we're talking about the digital economy that they're going to be working in, of course, a lot of these intellectual property laws that we have around the world, the original ideas are hundreds of years old. They come from the invention of the printing press and so on. And with digital technologies, how quickly we can share information, data, pictures, movies, and so on, is challenging a lot of those laws and the assumptions behind them. So that's why we need to be educating our students about how those laws, some of them still stand, but some of them need to change.
Yes, I agree with you, but perhaps the challenge for our students is they don't come from one jurisdiction, right? They're not all Chinese, they're not all Thai, they're not Chinese and Thai, some are from Myanmar, some are from Europe. So are we teaching them some specific laws that they should follow, or are we teaching them a framework and so later on they will know how to navigate this framework?
Yeah, well, as we talk about often in the class, a lot of the basic principles are the same across different countries. Even in very different legal systems, the basic principles of copyright or patents, they're fairly generalizable, they're fairly international. Again, when you get into some of the detail, that's where you're going to need a lawyer to advise you on the particular copyright laws in China, or how to register a patent in China or Thailand or Myanmar. But again, we're trying to give our would-be entrepreneurs of the future a basic understanding of what might be protectable in their business, and when someone might be stealing their intellectual property, a basic understanding of those types of ideas.
But don't you think in the next 10 years IP law will become obsolete, because it will be harder and harder for companies to control where the song is floating, and you're trying to protect it, and someone else in another country is trying to break the code, so eventually there will be no IP.
Yeah, it's an important question. In many ways, some people would argue IP law already is obsolete. I mean, the number of videos or songs or video games that are being illegally copied every day, huge amounts of that infringement is going on. Nonetheless, we have laws for a reason that we're trying to establish certain principles. And as we also talk about in the class, there is a relationship between stronger intellectual property laws and economic growth, which is to say, when a country strengthens its intellectual property, you're going to have entrepreneurs and businesses more willing to invest in ideas because they can protect them, they can make money from them. Now, clearly, there are going to be parts of intellectual property law that governments need to look at again. But, we don't change laws just on the basis that some people are breaking them. Otherwise, we'd get rid of laws for murder because murders still happen. They still establish basic principles that we would like societies to live by.
You mentioned that IP laws help countries develop, but I was thinking about China for quite a number of years. Maybe they were not enforcing IP laws. Maybe same in Thailand. China in terms of production, maybe Thailand in terms of sales. They were not enforcing the laws, and so maybe some local citizens were earning money. And then as soon as corporations came in, now countries are really enforcing laws. I was particularly thinking about Thailand. 10 years ago, you would go into a coffee shop and they were playing Michael Jackson song, Madonna song. Today you go inside, it's some kind of generic music or maybe a Michael Jackson cover, Madonna cover, because government police is really enforcing this particular thing. So they're helping corporations and hurting the citizens. That's the vision.
Yeah, so this is one of the debates about intellectual property and particularly enforcement, as you say, is who is that serving? So there are a number of ways you can see that. Some people would say, well, it's all right to download a movie you haven't paid for or music you haven't paid for because it's a kind of victimless crime. A big corporation, a Disney or Warner Brothers, they're not going to have their fortunes harmed by a few people doing this or even a few thousand people doing that. Of course, we're more interested in the individual entrepreneur trying to set up a business, trying to generate intellectual property and then protect it. So in a sense, for our students, that bigger debate around intellectual property law and who it serves is kind of somewhat irrelevant. Do our students have the skills to protect and the knowledge to protect their intellectual property? And do they know what to do if they think someone has stolen that intellectual property? And that could be they could think that it's a big corporation, for example, who's stolen their intellectual property. So this works both ways. Disney Corporation might have more expensive lawyers, but in principle, you should be able to defend against a big corporation like Disney if you think they've stolen your ideas or taken from them in some way. In that sense, intellectual property law should serve the small entrepreneur as well as the big business.
And when general public and students think about this term intellectual property, they always think, I think about a book, a song, some patent for a new invention, but as we discussed in the class, it could be your trademark, the name of your business, the logo, the recipe, the way you bake your cookies, the way you organize your database. So anything that helps you earn the money and anything that distinguishes you from your competitors. And so we're trying to teach students how to protect it. But again, in the world of AI, let's say I have a coffee shop. Previously, I would hire an artist who would create a logo specifically for me. We have the author, we have the company that is purchasing the logo. It was all very clear. These days, I go online, I generate a logo for my coffee shop by an AI company. Who is the owner of this logo? Am I the owner? Are they still the owner? You go on the same chatbot, you are trying to generate your logo, and your logo might look kind of similar to my logo because it's the same AI, and then it could end up in the courts, and then the courts will have to debug all of this, right?
Yeah, so there are two important things in there. The first point you made is really important. Generally, in technology and innovation circles, we still tend to think of new technologies, new to the world technologies. And so there's a kind of overemphasis on patents, some new scientific invention. And we can neglect the other types of intellectual property, like you say, a new recipe that could be a trade secret for your cafe, your restaurant, your business, the trademark, the brand. There are probably lots of businesses, including in Thailand, that might be local businesses at the moment, but haven't protected their name. And so they are open. They run the risk of someone opening a restaurant or a cafe, any other type of business with the same name in a neighboring city, and maybe growing that business faster and then taking over the name. So we need to think about intellectual property in a much broader way beyond the new technologies. The second point is definitely something we talked about a lot in the course. What does all this mean in an age of artificial intelligence? We talk about how artificial intelligence companies might be breaking copyright themselves. There are lots of big court cases going on about that at the moment. Are they just copying from work that's already out there on the internet and misusing that, infringing that work? But then also, what does it mean if you use AI to create something? As you say, maybe you use it to create a design or brand for your business. Save on you hiring a designer. Who owns that? This is one of those situations where intellectual property law will have to catch up with what is a very fast-moving, fast-changing technology. And the law is still being written around who owns what artificial intelligence creates. Can you own that even if you only just put in a prompt to make the artificial intelligence create that brand, for example? The law is not quite clear about that yet. So this is something we're going to have to think about much more in the future.
So I had this thought, keystone, right? It holds the arch together. You take out the keystone and the whole arch will collapse. So I'm thinking about different courses students study, let's say at CMU, at ICDI, how to code, how to market, how to count the money. So all these things kind of generate your income, your profits for you. But then our course is kind of a keystone. It will help you secure the future and not lose it, because as soon, it's quite easy maybe to open a shop and start selling coffee or cookies. But then as soon as you become popular, other people will try to copy your behavior, and only our course will prevent others from stealing stuff.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And this is why at the end of the course we get the students in their groups to present a business idea that they've created during the course, and then specifically to think about how they would protect it. And one of the things we do is show them examples of pitches. There are television programs, different countries, where entrepreneurs are pitching their ideas to investors. And of course, what the students realize is one of the most important questions that the entrepreneurs get asked in those pitches is, what do you own? What ideas do you own there? How have you protected, in intellectual property terms, those ideas that are so valuable to your business? Because that's what you're really investing in. What does this business own in intellectual property terms, and how can we use that to create a successful business in the future? So I hope what students come out of our course realizing is just how central intellectual property is to any successful business that's going to grow over time. And and how one of the biggest mistakes that new entrepreneurs can make is not protecting their intellectual property.